We are so excited that you decided to tune in this morning for our online experience. Truth is, we missed you. And we're believing that God is going to meet you wherever you are. So let's just begin to prepare our hearts for worship and our minds for the word. And remember that during any time during the service, you can give with the information provided on the screen. Let's go.
Can you imagine the authenticity of seeing a church, ecclesia, that's moving the people, that literally is an echo, a sound, a reflection of what heaven truly looks like?
Fresh start.
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 That you're moving in the right direction. I wish I had a believer up in here.
When you called by God, that's the qualifier.
Who's gonna learn from this? Who's gonna give up on God for this?
The bread of life, the great I am. Somebody, anybody, can you give him a thank you praise?
For about 15 to 20 seconds, can we remind that joker and give him a spiritual headache?
And God is telling Jesus, get the hell out of you.
Can you look at somebody and say, I had to be stepped on, I had to be lied on, I had to be crushed up, I wish I had some believers that will have church with me up in here.
But do you know how we started? It was Sunday, June 28th, 2009. This was the going away party for then Elder Boone as he was transitioning out of his position as youth pastor to now becoming a senior pastor, starting his own church. There was excitement, there was grief, there was happiness, there was resentment. There were all of these bittersweet feelings from both sides of the spectrum. Yet, then Elder Boone knew what it was that he had to do.
The move was what needed to happen. There were going to be some good times, there were going to be some bad times, but he needed us to be very supportive of where he was going and what he was going to have to go through.
The 24-year-old decided to plant his own church in the city of Duluth, Georgia.
I remember when we were having Bible study at the hotel up the street here. It's about 18 of us, and back then our entire praise team was one guy and a portable organ.
We had one little keyboard, and one of my old Bible college classmates was leading praise and worship. His name was Noe Garcia.
The first Bible study was his vision, what God gave him for Fresh Start.
And so the 18 of us would meet there once a week, and we would just praise God and pray and have our Bible study.
I wasn't there for the first one, but I remember coming to the ones after that and being in that hotel room and feeling this organic thing. And I'm sitting there like, what in the world is going on? What is happening? I'm seeing the people singing, and I'm sitting there. I'd never seen it before. And so in that moment, I knew, I got you, God. You're doing something here. I'm supposed to be here in this moment.
It just started this family-like community of people who were after the same vision and who trusted him. They trusted him enough to know that he was being led by God. So they had no issue being led by a 24-year-old, which I thought was amazing.
And from there, I knew we had a good group of people who really wanted to see that vision come to pass, and we started meeting every Tuesday night.
God, this is really happening.
During the entire month of July, he and the people around him met at least 3 times a week, planning the first service, planning how church would go thereafter, planning all the things that we needed, not only to sustain, but to grow. And there it was, August 2nd, 2009, 11 years ago to this date.
Now that was an experience because people who loved him and supported him, even though they were not following him to Fresh Start Church, he had quite a few supporters to come out there.
I remember that service because I remember there was probably about 400 or 500 people there.
Where did all these people come from? Every seat on the first floor was filled.
We weren't expecting as many people as there were. We were like, wow. Granted, there were different types of people there. There were people there for Boone. Then there were people there for the vision. Then there were people there to be nosy. So like just all those people clumped into one. But the interesting thing is now they all were in the building.
I remember Pastor Boone being on the stage down there, and this was the first time I had seen a pastor come in and wash another pastor's feet, and that kind of like blew me away, you know.
That was not in our script. It wasn't something that we put in, you know, for it to happen. So when it happened, you know, we were like, wow. In one of our Bible studies a couple weeks prior, he did that to the ministers and elders. So for someone to come back around who was not there for the ministers and elders to come around and do it for him, it was like, this is definitely God.
Yeah, there was a lot of backlash to him starting his own church because, of course, when you are in a place in which you are an asset to that community, and then you take that asset away from them, people are going to react emotionally, and then people are going to act erratically. So there was a lot of pushback to that.
The last 30 days of him leaving that ministry, God at that moment was cleansing everything that happened to him. Everyone that was a part of that initial ministry and knew everything, we couldn't do anything but stand and cry.
After moving on from the Infinite Energy Center, Fresh Start found a new home at the Seventh-day Adventist Church off of Duluth Highway.
So when you talk about the transition from the Gwinnett Arena to the Seventh-day Adventist, literally I had signed a contract with Gwinnett Arena and for like 3 months, and I paid it all up front, and then they didn't have any more openings. So in my head I was thinking, well, if we start, maybe those people will cancel and then we can just extend our time. So we were coming up on our 3rd month, and I was like, man, we don't have no place to go after this 3rd month because they don't have any more rooms available until 2 months after that. And so I started looking at schools and all that kind of stuff. Everybody had a process, didn't have enough time. So the last choice was this
Seventh-day Adventists. We started using their church on Sunday since they weren't using it.
Seventh-day Adventist church that was so just not us. It was traditional, it had stained glass windows, it smelled like mildew when you walk in. I mean, it had pews, they were red and old. They had wood panels on the wall.
When I first drove up, I was like, are we doing this? Like, this what we, this, cause it was so different. It was so different from what I've seen before. I was like, wow, this is different. And the smell, that was a very real thing. I remember walking in and just being like, yeah, this is God. God, did I hear it? Yeah, I heard you, God.
And I was like, I'm not having church here. And my board members, specifically the CFO at the time, she was just like, oh, this would work. It's only $700 and da 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 da. And I was like, I can't see myself having church in here. And I think at that moment I was limiting God because I felt like, probably like every pastor who starts, we get in this mode that we think the building is what's going to draw the people. And what's interesting now, more than ever, we're seeing that in this pandemic, the building ain't drawing nobody. God had to remind me that it wasn't a building that was going to make the church grow. So I yielded, we moved in there and had our first service. And did I tell you that we had to get permission to have drums? Like, it was a horrible experience getting in there, but we got in there and we grew.
And the one thing I liked about being over there, we felt more together over there because it wasn't our building. And so at the end of each service, we would all pitch in and clean up and take the garbage out and get the place back to the way it was before we came in. And it really felt like we were coming together as a church and as a church family. And so we stayed there, I guess, for, I don't know, almost a year.
I remember still, even though aesthetically it was different, the thing in me that is going back to that again, it was stirring more of like, God began to remind me in that moment, I can use anything, even what's not necessarily appealing to the eye. And so I didn't know at the time, that's when God was even cultivating my heart to see things differently, for sure.
They seem to be very hungry for the word. They seem to be very hungry for a move of God. And a lot of the traditions that I had been accustomed to, they were not there.
Even though the time was short at the Seventh-day Adventist location, it felt like years, as Fresh Start was closely gaining ground on finding their own building.
When we left the Seventh-day Adventist, we went to this place called Evergreen. And I'm just a real big, audacious faith kind of guy. And we went from literally $700 for Seventh-day Adventist, and then we found this building. I was like, I want this building. I think it's nice, it's beautiful. We can make it this. And we literally were going to be doubling what we were paying per month. And the board was just like, that's just too much. And I made the landlord an offer, and it was definitely a faith offer, and everybody thought they was going to reject it. I asked for like, I want 2 years free, I want to pay this, I want to pay that, and they was like, man, they never going to accept that, and they accepted it.
(1965) Evergreen. And it was a warehouse building that we went in and we converted over into a sanctuary. So there was a room that we started in. Man, that room my living room was probably a little bigger than that room was. But we started in there with these black chairs, and we would have our service in there, and we built a little stage.
So at Evergreen, we got to be our really true, authentic self, who Fresh Start really was.
We started our youth ministry there.
Enter Pastor Alex Brown. Pastor Alex has this ability to walk into a room and like take the energy, whether it's at like a -2 or 1020, and just explode it, right? He has this ability just like to change the energy as soon as he walks into a room. And he had that effect on the kids because every time he walked into the room, he made them feel like they were seen.
If you looked up the word genuine in the dictionary, Alex's picture would be right there. Alex genuinely loves people. He genuinely loves God. He exudes, intimacy with God out of every pore. When I got to Fresh Start, he was the youth pastor, and what he built, that youth ministry was so thriving. But it wasn't just thriving in terms of attendance. The presence of God, the power of God. These young people were encountering God in a very real and tangible way.
Honestly, I never wanted to be a youth pastor. Like, I didn't seek after it. I wasn't like, I'm gonna make this move, and I'm gonna be the guy. That wasn't it for me. It was always about how can I serve. And so many don't know this. So before moving to serving as youth pastor, I served on the greeting team, and I was content, and I was really good at that too. But like, I was really content with just being in that role. Like, people coming in for the first time, I'm smiling, hugging them, just seeing them be good. I wasn't close to Apostle Boone at the time, meaning like I wasn't like trying to be right next to him. I was content with being at that door and serving that place. But I was determined to be the best greeter they'd ever seen. Like, that was my big thing. And so for me, going from that and then having the convo with Apostle Boone about about, he had a vision for what he wanted youth to look like. And he asked me about the youth pastor role, and I was like, let's do it.
Things were at an all-time high, but with so much growth, there needed to be more leadership in place to handle the capacity. Enter Pastor Isaiah.
You're an awesome God. You're a mighty God. We didn't just come for a show, but we came for the Savior. And anytime you decide to step in, it's okay with us because you're holy. You're holy. All of heaven declares you're holy. All the angels declare you're holy. All the elders declare you're holy. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Come on.
With similar backgrounds in youth ministry as Pastor Boone, Pastor Isaiah had this freshness and this vigor for reaching the community and doing the work of God that he fit in perfectly.
The devil's already a defeated foe. Over 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ died on the cross so that you can receive everything God has for you. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. Don't scare yourself out of your millions. Don't scare yourself out of your promotion. Don't scare yourself out of your house. Don't scare yourself out of your husband. Don't scare yourself out of your destiny. High five 3 people and tell them don't be scared. Don't. There's too much at stake to be scared.
So one of the things that I took away from Fresh Start is being hardworking, and the benefit of not overexerting yourself, but ensuring that you are plugged in and engaged, not just spiritually, but civically, economically. Professionally, personally, right? So that's one of the things that I've taken away from Fresh Start, just the importance of working hard, ensuring that you're not just falling back and resting on your laurels.
Corey Bowie and the Worship Arts Ministry began to combine different styles of music to make their own sound that was pleasing to God, that we've never heard before.
They kinged themselves on not just singing. It was all about the worship experience to God. That's what, it wasn't about a voice, because I always said I have like one note. I don't know how I'm going to be a part of this, but I love the worship experience I received, and I wanted to be a part of that.
We were doing a lot of contemporary Christian songs, which was new for someone who grew up going to black churches, and you had like this big gospel presence. And here we have black people singing "I'm a Friend of God," and it was a culture shock because it was just different.
The worship was so different. It was so liberating.
The worship culture is reverent, but also freestyling, unscripted, enthusiastic, creative, many rooms, expressive, cutting edge.
The worship culture is, I think, fresh. Again, it's authentic. I don't think Fresh Start tries to be like anybody else. I think Fresh Start does what Fresh Start does. Whatever it takes to reach the kingdom, whatever it takes to reach God, whatever it takes to bring people in, I think that's what they're doing.
So something that was extremely memorable for me was when KCJ was getting a word from, I forget who it was that was giving her the word about her future and what God was calling her to. And she was weeping. And this was before, the albums. This was before, Fill Me Up and all of these things. And just remembering that, because hindsight is 2020, remembering that moment and then comparing that moment to all that's transpired is really just phenomenal.
She had this thing where she would take two different songs and she would just mish them things together. And I was like, how did that go? But it goes. It goes very well. And we're still probably singing some of those same mashups until this day.
But as we all know, that with great growth comes great change. Pastor Alex Brown, our very first youth pastor, was chosen to plant his own church in Morrow, Georgia.
When Pastor Alex decided to lead a new church, it was heartbreaking, but at the same time, we were very happy for him because he was just like part of the family.
He was faithful, he was committed, and when he finally branched off to do Life Revolution, you could just see the hand of God on his life. You could just see the hand of God in that ministry.
Enter Pastor Christopher Cox.
God freed you from debt, but you still acting like you ain't got no financial responsibility. You're out of slavery, but you still have the behaviors. Come on, tell somebody beside you, you gotta stop acting like that, Charlotte.
Act like that, Charlotte.
Youth ministry at the time, Pastor Chris was there. It was fun. He made sure we had fun, still understand, got an understanding of the values of God and having a relationship and building a relationship with God, as well as us building a bond with each other. Like, he definitely encouraged us knowing that we are all brothers and sisters there.
I first started in youth ministry at Fresh Start. I started as a volunteer in the youth ministry under Pastor Alex. I learned so much working and serving with Pastor Alex, and I had no idea he was setting me up to kind of follow in his footsteps. It was kind of weird for me one night. He said he had to go out of town. He was like, Chris, I'm leaving you in charge. I want you to bring the message and just take care of Ignite at the time. And I was like, okay. Yeah, I should have caught on right then.
And then Pastor Chris had this incredible ability to disciple and shepherd small groups of people right? So he was like, okay, I could take this 5 or I can take this 6 and I'm gonna walk with them and show them everything that I know, right? He had this really, really great ability for discipleship, for making disciples.
I have so many memorable moments at Fresh Start. One of them being shooting the real pastors of Fresh Start. We did our own reality show.
Look, that was such an enjoyable time recording that. You know, I remember just laughing so hard. It was difficult to get through the recording because Pastor Chris, who was the youth pastor at that time, was just hilarious.
Did 3 services. Oh my God, it had to be at least a couple years. And from those 3 services, we would be there from like 7:30 in the morning to, I don't know, 1:30 in the afternoon. But it was so much fun because we just kept seeing the growth of Fresh Start Church, and the people were coming. They were just coming by the droves. And so after we stayed there for a few years, of course, we outgrew that building. And then that brought us to where we are now in 2021.
West Liddell Road. Another real audacious moment. I found this building driving and I was like, man, this could be really, really dope. I inquired about it and literally they was like, it's gonna be $30,000 a month. I was like, $30,000 a month? Oh man, we can get that building. And everybody was like, you're crazy, you're insane. And then I made another astronomical offer. I was like, hey, I want this amount of years free. I want to do owner finance and I want this amount to go towards the down payment, blah, blah, blah. And I made the guy an offer and he rejected it. And I was like, take it back to him again. And they took it back to him again and he asked to go to lunch with me, and we went and met at lunch, and he asked me what I wanted. And this is a Jew. So I was sitting at the table with a Jew who literally had owned this building. It used to be a Hi-Fi Buys. And he asked me and said, what do you want? And I specifically told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to do an owner finance kind of situation, and this is what I wanted to pay, and this is how I wanted to go towards down payment, all that kind of stuff. And when I presented to him, he had one small change, shook my hand and said, we got a deal.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Hey Fresh Start, this is Pastor Boone. I am standing here in our brand new facility, and I just wanted to remind you that we're going to be worshiping here at our brand new spot, 2021 West Liddell Road at 10 a.m.
West Liddell was yet another big transition. We had outgrown Evergreen yet again, which is a good problem to have for a church. And so we were just all excited about the fact that now we had even more space.
When we walked into this building, after we obtained it, and all of the men came together and began to tear it apart, pour the carpet up, and do whatever we needed to do to get it ready to have services. It was such a togetherness, and I've never seen that with men in churches.
First time actually experiencing it. So when they had actually moved to West Liddell, I was at school in Kentucky. So I actually came home and saw it for the first time on one of my breaks. And it was like, this is it. First, my first instinct was like, oh, this is nice.
I think it was heightened when we moved from Evergreen to West Liddell. I think from what I can remember on Evergreen, that was when we started doing imagery, and there were, we were doing videos and things of that nature. So I think that level of excitement, I think it just grew. to where when we moved to West Liddell, I mean, we were doing major productions. I love those.
And it seemed to get bigger and bigger, and the experiences were great. I mean, it started with, I was already in a wild stage. So as we began to learn more and learn Bible study and the whole visuals of the sound and still learning and how to please God, it still became mind-blowing. And I still get excited every time I get to be active in those experiences.
Enter Chanda Makula.
My experience here, ushering in people into the presence of God, has been, at first I was very nervous to come behind, the ministry of Casey. Being a world-renowned worship leader and songwriter, but I just had to be comfortable in my own skin, and so I found my identity here at Fresh Start.
Chanda as a worship leader was super dope, really. Again, very different. I never experienced leadership like that before, and I never experienced a worship leader like that before, to hear from God in the way that she does, and to come up with the flows that she comes up with. It was just super dope to watch, how God can use someone in that way.
Chanda's worship style was like no other. It was different, but it was needed. Chanda had these ways of coming up with songs of the Lord that would literally shift the whole atmosphere within the service. That's how mention came, with her being able to flow.
'Cause at the mention of your name, every knee will bow, every tongue confess that you are Lord. Can you help us say that? 'Cause at the mention of your name, every knee will bow, every tongue confess that you are Lord. You are Lord. 'Cause at the mention of your name, yeah, every knee, every tongue confess, yeah, you are Lord. Sickness has to bow, and at the mention of your name, every knee, every tongue confess, you are Lord. Yes, you are. Oh, 'cause Jesus, you are Lord. It's just that easy. Jesus, you are Lord. Yes, you are. Yeah. Your sound is so sweet. Jesus, you are Lord. Yes, you are. Yeah. Oh, yes, you are. And at the mention of your name, the scales fall from their eyes. Once blinded eyes will see that you are Lord. So at the mention of your name, the scales fall from their eyes. Once blinded eyes will see that you are Lord. Say, Jesus, you are.
June 16th, 2019. Pastor Boone had been on vacation, and this was his first Sunday back. Everyone was excited to see him. He had been gone for a few weeks. And then he got up to preach, and he began giving the word. And after he gave his word, he announced that he would no longer pastor Fresh Start Church, but that he was stepping up to become an apostle of the house.
No, honestly, man, I always knew when I started pastoring that it wasn't going to be forever like we've always seen. And I would say God made me a promise when I was like 16. He said, if you go hard for me now, I'll let you play hard later. Didn't really know what that meant until I got older and walked in ministry and all that kind of stuff. And so to be 100% honest with everybody, I felt like I should have transitioned after my divorce. And that was my initial like gut feeling, like, okay, this is that season for me to transition and move and release the ministry. And during that time, I tried everything, you know, and it just, I guess the timing wasn't right and certain things just didn't fit and connect. And so I stayed and I kept preaching and kept doing everything I was doing. But I always felt like it was time for me to transition into the office that I felt I was called to. Because I always felt like I did the work of an apostle, but never took the office of the apostleship. Like, I love planting ministries. I love grooming, you know, pastors. I love helping ministers, you know, develop their craft and that kind of stuff. So I always knew that part was in me. And then when I decided to literally just say, you know what, forget everything, I gotta get this out and I gotta do this. It was literally maybe 2018 is when I literally started making the process to start the journey there. And then 2019 is when I made it official.
The initial call to come back home to Fresh Start, it was an ongoing conversation. Like, for me, when I first heard about, I know that God was calling him to do something different. For me, it was just about being there for him. And so that conversation the first one wasn't like, all right, you leaving, I'm coming, let's do this. Like, it wasn't that, it was more like, this is huge. What does he need in this moment? You could probably see this theme of, my heart is for God has put me in a position where my heart is, my heart wants to see his heart whole, growing, like that thing when you're called to someone. I think you want to get that. It's very rare that you get that with somebody, right? And so for me, it was just about, again, being there for him. What does he need in a variety of ways, right? And then as we talked more and more and more, and I knew that there was a process, and so I wanted Fresh Start to go through whatever that process was. I just didn't want to be just come in and they'd be like, oh, obviously him, like he's a son in the ministry. Not. They went through the process. They checked everything out. They with other people who they interviewed various things, and so all that time I simply just prayed for Fresh Start. That's it. My goal was never to manipulate my way into anything. I was content where I was until a God moment happened again. And then it was, I'm shifting. And when God says that to me, I go.
And definitely wasn't an easy decision because, you know, you get used to doing something for such a long time, and then everybody expect it, you know? I mean, when you look at the average pastor, you see them pastor till they die. Like, I knew from the get-go that never was going to be me. Nothing that I'd done, and when you look at my history, whether it was from youth ministry to pastoring to music to film to business, like, I've never been that dude that felt like just because you do something and it works, that you have to do it forever. I mean, we would have revivals or conferences and stuff at the church, and they'd be like, oh, that was great, when are we doing it next year? I'm like, we're not. Because I think we get in that habit that when you start something, you have to continually do it. When you look at Jesus didn't really go to none of the places he went to more than once. And some of the places that he visited more than once, those people only had a very small opportunity to get that exposure, to get what they needed. And I felt the same way with the ministry. It's just like, some things God literally allows you to plant, and then he gives someone to you to grow it. And then he gives someone to you to sustain it. Then he gives someone to you, like, same thing he did with Adam. In the beginning, he created all this stuff, and then he put Adam in it and said, okay, now you tend to it. Like, God started, but he wasn't going to literally go out there and subdue the ground and plan and do all that kind of stuff. Like, he put somebody there to do that part. And then from there, it grew and it became something else, and it evolved and all that. And I think that's what happens with ministry. And even when you look at Christ's ministry was 3.5 years. You know, it's 3.5 years, but he made an amazing impact in those 3.5 years. But when he left, he gave it to someone else, another group of people who were able to carry it on past where he started. And I think when it comes to churches, when we get so stuck in doing something out of custom or out of tradition, or just because we've been doing it, that's when you find a ministry stagnant. That's when you find a ministry stop growing. People stop really evolving and really finding out who God is. So every now and then you have to always jolt. You always have to do something that shocks, something that makes people, like even Jesus said, he said birds of the air have a nest, fox have holes. He said, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Meaning every day we're gonna be somewhere different. Never get so comfortable with the normal that you fail to miss the unknown. And Christ always lived in the unknown place. He will always be progressive. He was always moving. Things was always changing. And I think that's what I had to embrace with the call to apostleship, that I can transition out of an office into another office and still this particular vision could grow based on who I put it in the hands of. So when you talk about the number 11, and maybe they'll put your soundbite on what you said it means, chaos and disorder and all that kind of stuff. What's interesting is that by the time people are viewing this video, we would be celebrating our 11th year, right? But 11 years is the completion of 11. We're entering into the 12th year, which means that 11 vibration that we're seeing is prophetic. And this 11th year of the ministry, we had to transition from a pastor to an apostle. Then the pastor literally was thrown into a pandemic that no one has ever pastored in our lifetime during a pandemic. So it's chaos, it's disorder. You got people who are sad of the transition. You got some people who are mad. You got people who are upset that they can't go outside. I mean, it's a lot of different things happening. So prophetically, that 11th year that we just came out of, this is the end. We're not in the 11th year. We finished the 11th year. We finished the chaos. We finished the pandemic. We finished all of that stuff. We're entering into a 12th year. It's coming to a place of government, order, stuff that people may have been used to before. That's out. It's a whole new system now. It's a whole new order. It's a whole new regime. It's a whole new way of life. It's a whole new way of ministry. And we are literally witnessing it right now, right before our eyes. This is a fresh start. We're not in a building anymore. We're online. It's a new thing. Chaos birth innovation. If you can't embrace your 11, you'll never fulfill your 12. And whenever you deal with chaos is almost a prerequisite for innovation. It forces you to become innovative. It forces you to plan. It forces you to think outside the box. It forces you to do things like everything Jesus did was innovative, but it came out of an issue, a problem. The people were hungry. That was an issue. They were talking, murmuring. The disciples were trying to send them home. It was chaotic. Jesus says, you feed them. They like, we ain't got nothing to feed them with. He's like, they find this little boy's food. They give it to Jesus. They put it in Jesus' hand. I just want people to understand, like, what we complain about, somebody could be killing it if they had it in their hand. It's not about what's in the bag. It's the hand that the bag is in. And you know how in our culture we talk about, man, secure the bag, get the bag. You have an opportunity now to take a chaotic moment, become innovative, and make this bag feed a whole bunch of people in the middle of chaos, in the middle of a whole bunch of just different things that are happening. So we've ended an 11th year. We've made it through chaos. We've made it through this crazy pandemic, this transition, this from in-person to online. Now we're in this 12th year.
Re-enter Pastor Alex.
Can you imagine the authenticity of seeing a church, ecclesia, this movement of people that literally is an echo, a sound, a reflection of what heaven truly looks like? Meaning people from various walks of life, people various backgrounds, the CEO next to the homeless, etc. Even greater on a digital platform. There's this space where you can be watching something and you have no idea who else is watching it, but you somehow know we're all interconnected. I believe that as the gospel is being spread, you are going to see people from various walks of life being connected in a way like they never have before. And I'm believing that our church, that Fresh Start Church, will be a trendsetter in what other churches begin to model. Like, we're going to set this tone for what it looks like. And then this will even be in a place to share it with them so that they can also be better in doing it their way.
Combining that new sound of worship with Pastor Boone's cutting edge style of preaching, Fresh Start was unlike any other church. Fresh Start was unlike any other church in the community.